The Earnestly Speaking podcast is a show that is founded on free-flowing conversation and may at times venture into mature subjects. Listener discretion is advised.
Yeah, Earnestly Speaking podcast. Let's get it. I'm a giant in New York, in Miami carry heat. So much more in store, my product can flood the street. Opinion Nation Godfather, CEO. Pop in the late 90s, gon' see me blow. Oh. Got my hustle on, no imitation of bad. Army of untouchables, Opinion Nation staff. Never an off season, homie, check the numbers. Heart throbbing my own right, supplying southern comfort. Earnestly speaking, my ego is well fed. Earnestly speaking, you're too feeble and no threat. See, I'm like a hurricane, you're a mild breeze. Earnestly speaking, leaving Eli a dynasty. Shake!
The podcast coming to you December 7th, 2023. It is a day that should live in infamy because it is, what year is it now? 72 years since Pearl Harbor? No, 82 years.
Oh, yeah. December 7th, yeah.
Yeah, 82 years since Pearl Harbor was attacked.
82 years since Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. Familiar face of the show. Marc Francois, one of the alums of this podcast with us.
Happy to be back. Good morning.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's been a couple months, though. But how you doing?
Mm-hmm. Doing well, man. Doing well. Although I am learning the meaning of a New York winter. We always talk about like weather in the past because I was SoCal based, and yesterday was a high of like 43, so that was fun.
Do you like the cold? Are you okay with it?
Honestly, I don't mind it. Like New York cold, I can definitely do because like I lived in northern Canada or Edmonton for a while, so like I learned enough about myself doing that I don't ever want to do that shit again. So Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota, places like that, Buffalo, no thank you. Right. But yeah, New York, DC, that's manageable.
All right, so today's docket of topics here, of course, we're going to discuss something I've really not say avoided, but something I haven't really wanted to touch on too much until I had proper guest on, the Israel-Hamas conflict. We'll touch on that a little bit. The GOP presidential race, obviously, where we're going now, because we're now in caucus season now. I mean, the first caucus is next month. Some really concerning Joe Biden polling coming up. That's been, I mean, it gets worse and worse every week. You look at the new polling. George Santos, what a clown. We'll talk about him in a second. And then, of course, we get some sports, your Lakers, of course, and then Shohei Ohtani, is he going to Dodgers? We'll see.
I've been saying it for a year and a half.
Yeah. we can find out about that news any minute. It can happen while we're recording this podcast. So they said at some point this week he'll make a decision on that, but we'll see.
Yeah.
All right.
That blood's been in the water for a long time. That it was even though there were Yankees, Cubs, others in consideration, it was like kind of the Dodgers to lose since the All-Star break.
It's a West Coast. No, to me, it's about three teams. It's San Francisco, it's the Dodgers, and it's the Angels, and maybe in Seattle. It's a wild card. It's a West. He wants to go to the West, but we'll touch on that when we get to that part of the show. Okay. So again, a very sensitive topic. I got a lot of friends, Jewish. I'm married to a Jewish woman. Number one, a lot of Jewish friends. A lot of them from Israel, like born in Israel. Some served in the army there. Also got friends of Palestinian, and it's a very chaotic situation there. We're 2 months into this latest conflict now. 2 months in, as of yesterday, I think it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I literally to the day. It's the attacks began on October 7th.
Yeah, exactly. It's just tragic hearing this stuff, and and I think what I've learned this time around. Because I remember growing up in a church and growing up in a very strict Christian home, not his last name, but because of, religion and whatnot. Always taught that Israel, protect Israel at all costs, no matter what. Okay, I get it, whatever. And then as you get older, you start having mind of your own. You start thinking about, the politics behind that. Why is this that? Why is this that? I'll tell you, it's very fascinating and yet very sad and very troubling at the same time, all of it. This process. Again, it's and I hate it. No matter what happens, it always falls into a partisan politics to some degree. Although you see some blurred lines in some cases. Like there are Democrats who are still pro-Israel. John Fetterman spoke about that.
Well, and as we get to the end of this subject, it kind of dovetails into our next one. I want to sort of compare and contrast some of the things that are being said, from partisan positions about who could be doing a better job handling this. So I'm gonna make sure
between Trump and Biden.
Yeah.
Oh God.
I mean, the people use. We'll get to it.
No, but it's just like, I not that I said I avoided the conversation, but I'm learning still. I'm not going to just jump into this conversation I don't know enough about, especially as I'm learning about the Palestinian people now and the apartheid they've gone through and the things they've gone through for generations upon generations. And there's a lot of undoing I'm doing in my head now with what I was taught growing up. And then the fact of the matter is, too, also, you also have to separate the government from the will of the people. The Israeli government, the IDF, and the Israeli people are two separate entities. And I think people need to start using a little more common sense, a little more contextual thinking when it comes to this process.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it is. I mean, we're gonna talk about misinformation and propaganda,
yes, let's do that.
and all of that, and the PR of the IDF and the Israeli government. But I think it's really important to understand is, a lot of our understanding, or a lot of their efforts over the last 70, 80 years in order to maintain the political foothold they have has been inextricably intertwining the Jewish diaspora and the state of Israel. And I think divorcing those two things is incredibly important in this conversation, because yes, this conversation is not as we're going to get into, the war crimes that are being committed by Benjamin Netanyahu. That's not a critique or a comment on the entire global Jewish diaspora.
Right, correct.
But it's a comment on the Israeli government and the leadership of the Israeli government, because they're out of step with the will of their own people.
So lay out the what's going on. What are people? Because obviously, look, if you listen to the mainstream media, and I don't, because I've learned years ago that they're bought and paid for. It's pretty much 80%, 90% pro-Israel.
Yeah, and it's funny because as you were describing your upbringing, mine was almost kind of like a mirror image of that. So I grew up in a community outside of LA that was like 70, 80% Jewish. I was the only non-Jewish kid on my baseball or basketball team pretty much every year.
Yeah.
One of the big moments, like the earliest moment that I can really remember starting to kind of question the Israel of it all was when we were like in junior high. I was in 6th grade at least. Was the assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. It was like 96, 97.
Mid-90s,
yeah, 95 maybe, even like fall of 95, something like that. And I remember that obviously being an event that rocked my school, and even 6th graders were talking about it because most of the kids in school were Jewish, and including the teachers too. And obviously that kicked off a lot of that paved the way to Benjamin Netanyahu's first term as prime minister, and that was a lot of Clinton, Arafat, Netanyahu, those discussions, like that shit was on our news. It felt like every night for 3 years. What became really apparent to me was that there was no answer to the question of like, well, what about the Palestinians? Like, what is their gripe? Because like the minute you would bring that up, it would come from the kids, the teachers, pretty much everybody. It was like you'd get jumped on. That's like, what do you mean the Palestinian cause? Like, they're terrorists.
Same.
There is no cause but to defend Israel. It's like, well, what about settler colonialism and the violence that settlers commit to evict Palestine? And it's like, what? No, that's all. Are you saying we don't deserve a state? Are you an anti-Semite? Are you a bigot? It goes from 0 to 100 very quickly.
Absolutely. Even today.
And, as a kid, again, it was like, and then even when the debate would heat up in class, because the teacher is Jewish and went on birthright, and they have the same position as the kid who's jumping on me. So they're like, I didn't know that Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated by an Israeli far-right crazy person until I was like 30. I was like, wait a minute, what?
Well, really? I didn't know that.
Bingo. He wasn't even killed by a Palestinian or a Hamas fighter or Hezbollah.
Did they accuse the Palestinians of killing him though? Is that
no? But it was. I'm going strictly off of memory. This is not like documentaries or anything about it that I've watched. I'm just remembering what it was like as a kid in the late 90s. Obviously, that element of the story wasn't highlighted, and it kicked off. Netanyahu was obviously part of the reason Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated was because he was a two-state prime minister. He was much more agreeable on a meaningful two-state solution between Israelis and Palestinians. And the opposition, obviously, in Israel believes what Netanyahu believes, which is the Palestinians should be wiped off the map, which is, fast forward to today, why they're engaging in ethnic cleansing. I'm
looking at right now, Rabin and his history here.
But yeah, it led to yet another one of those sort of environments like we have right now, where the ascent of Netanyahu in the 90s led to a breakdown in conversations, a heightening, obviously everything becoming more tense, police becoming more violent, colonialism becoming more intense, all of that. And that led to a phase of, brutal conflict between Israelis and Palestinian resistance fighters of, a variety of affiliations. And, as we talk about that, it's also really, we talk about how important it is to separate, the Jewish diaspora from the Israeli government and Benjamin Netanyahu. The same is true, of course, with the Palestinians and organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah, or Islamic Jihad and things like that. Those groups do commit heinous acts against Israelis as well as Palestinians. They believe in a lot of that, like 9th century militant Islam crap, like you see, with Wahhabis and others. But to suggest that this is like, say, a war between equals, or one of the analogies that gets used is, if there's an active shooter situation and someone is holding a gun to an innocent civilian's head, are you going to just bomb the location of where this standoff is taking place? Because that's what Israel's doing. They're leveling entire neighborhoods. 20,000 Palestinians have been killed, half of which have been children. Right. And when you talk about that as a percentage of the population of Gaza, to put it in scale, that would be like 2.5 million Americans.
Yeah. And like it's like they're willing to to bomb one. Let's say you have one Hamas member versus like 200 children and women, for example, in one area. They're willing to bomb that place for that one Hamas person just to get it's bad. By the way, he was assassinated. November 4th, 1995, by Gil Meir, a right-wing extremist who opposed the signing of the Oslo Records.
There you go.
There's a documentary about him. I gotta check it out. The documentary on him, actually. It's funny. I remember hearing this as a kid, but I didn't dive into this stuff as a child.
But it's also really important to, regardless of what you believe about who's right, who's wrong, who has a gripe, what those gripes are, what is irrefutable is that collective punishment is a war crime. Attacking, and what do I mean when I say collective punishment? That means cutting off energy, oil, water, food, resources, internet. That's collective punishment, and under the Geneva Conventions, it is a war crime.
Right.
And the bombing of civilians and murdering of children, these are war crimes. And when we talk about, okay, well, doesn't Israel have a right to defend itself? Yes, Israel does. But that's not what they're doing. and all you have to do is listen to them. There are a number of Israeli ministers, which is like cabinet secretaries, including their minister of defense, and right up to Benjamin Netanyahu. Israeli politicians regularly use language that is genocidal language when describing Palestinians. They describe them as vermin. They describe them as less than human, as filthy animals who, want to only commit rape and murder. Not dissimilar from how white people were, in the Klan were depicting black people, say, in the early 20th century with things like Birth of a Nation. It's a lot of the same shit. It's honestly, when you really dig into it, it's frightening how the Israeli government weaponizes the Holocaust to, again, inextricably link the Jewish identity from the existence or to the Jewish state. And how many things they're doing that were Nazi tactics, both propaganda and violence. And they're saying, quite frankly, they want to wipe Gaza off the map.
Is there a way for people who are pro-Israel to separate the two? Because I see a lot of well-intentioned people who are pro-Israel, but I don't think have a broad understanding of the situation that goes just beyond your belief system and whatnot. Is there a way to separate the two, Hamas versus? Because the excuse is like this. Well, they voted Hamas in power in 2006.
The last election was 2006.
2006, and that's a generation ago.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? I had hair. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So,
the young people who are of voting age now were, in some cases, probably not born.
And do we even know if that was even a fair election? Given,
no, I don't. But that's just it. It's my understanding. Listening to other podcasts of much smarter and more informed people than we, like Just Buy Less Coffee or the New Abnormal and stuff like that. It seems diplomats are trying to bring the Palestinian Authority kind of to the forefront and have that be sort of the group with whom they're communicating about this. But it's difficult, when you talk about when you get into what should the two-state definition be? Where are the lines sort of with Israel and Palestine? Because when you go back to things like the Balfour Declaration and what the British and Americans did in the wake of World War II. They told the Palestinians they'd get a state. They told the Israelis they'd get a state. And then when it was convenient to help the Israelis, that's what they did after the war. I mean, that's really what it boiled down to. And as soon as they did, the first Nakba occurred, and Israelis displaced over 750,000 Palestinians and started throwing them off their land in Gaza and the West Bank. So the encroachment, the colonialism, the settlements, like that began in the 40s and has been little by little continuous. And the Palestinian people, like, they're the oppressed. They live in what was an open air prison and is now a killing field. And there's no self-determination. It's the equivalent, like Gaza is like the Warsaw Ghetto. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So would like it, if we talk about the people of the Warsaw Ghetto fighting back against the German army, like, are they heroes or terrorists?
Right.
Because if you'd have been watching that if we'd been seeing that on the news, say in 1940, the Polish people were the ones going to be called terrorists in that situation.
And then you have the U.S. portion of this now, the U.S. involvement in this, because we're funding. Yeah. We've been funding Israel for centuries, for decades or whatever, maybe.
Yeah, well, and Israel is a irreplaceable, like that. It's such a critical strategic position for the United States to hold as part of their network in the Middle East and North Africa, and that it's basic. Given all of the aid and weapons and technology and everything we've provided Israel over the years. Basically an extension of the U.S. military.
Right. a lot of the gripe to by taxpayers, me included, is, well, we're funding this stuff because that's taxpayer dollars being sent out there, and and I don't,
Healthcare, housing, education, wealth inequality is the worst it's ever
if
been.
I'm not mistaken, what the U.S. from what I read, I could be wrong on the figures here. The U.S. adds at least 20% of their overall budget,
Yeah.
if not more.
And Congress just proposed another $114 billion aid package.
Am I wrong for saying
the one that Bernie actually was one of the people who finally, like, his comments on ceasefire and whatnot have been upsetting as a quote unquote progressive.
But he should be surprised though. He's also Jewish too, though. I mean, he should be surprised.
Well, sure, but again, war crimes are war crimes, and now 2 months into this thing, it shouldn't be wishy-washy. Like, Israel is wrong.
But no one's
Israel
surprised.
is wrong.
Right.
Bad things did happen to Israelis, but for example, the Israeli, like, when attacks started on October 7th, yes, there was an attack at a music festival. Yes, Israeli civilians did get killed. This is true. People got kidnapped. Bad things happened. But a lot of the people who were killed at that music festival were also killed by the Israeli military firing machine guns at Hamas, doing kind of the same thing they do to the Palestinian people, where there's, say, 40 Hamas fighters streaming in through a hole in a fence and 300 Israeli people there, and they start firing with vehicle-mounted machine guns or whatever the hell they're using.
Right.
And for example, those rounds, like a 50, you're not supposed to use 50 caliber, which I don't know if they were, but if they were using like vehicle-mounted machine guns, they probably were. Large bore machine guns and rifles and things like that. The air displacement of those rounds is so violent that even if a bullet comes within a foot or two of you, it can tear off limbs. Like, if a 50 caliber bullet goes whizzing past you at the right range, that air displacement is so violent it can sever your arm, tear your arm off.
Yeah, of course.
So, yeah, hundreds of people were also killed by the Israeli military. And of course, the IDF doesn't like to talk about that. They have an entire unit dedicated to burying stories like that.
Yeah, it's very troubling. I will say, in terms of how I intake my coverage of this conflict, especially, I don't go to CNN, definitely. I mean, I don't go to CNN for anything, or Fox, or MSNBC. I will say the shows I listen to normally, Breaking Points, the individual podcasts I listen to, Rising. They've had very good, healthy, substantial debates on this. Even if one side or the other agrees with whatever, there are a lot more, let's say, authentic conversations about this than you get in the media, in the mainstream media.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of mine has come through, the activism and advocacy people I follow in social media, and even more progressive and leftist news sources. One of the ones that has been really helpful in this coverage and really understanding what's happening both here as well as in Israel around this conflict is Breakthrough News. They've been really terrific. Their coverage has been really well rounded. Al Jazeera English has been really great. Even Now This, those have been awesome resources. And then there's a number of like Palestinian advocates and activists that I follow that they're always posting really, really helpful stuff so that you can see kind of the full spectrum of what's happening.
There's a thought though that this conflict could be the undoing of Joe Biden's presidency.
Yeah.
I
hope not, and I hope not, because the alternative is still markedly worse, and that might actually be a really good dovetail into the next topic. But
right.
So what I was just going to say is, before we get to the state of the GOP race, it's important to really understand when people say, "God, Joe Biden's really screwing this up. I'm not voting for him again," or "I'm sitting out." You're voting for Trump, and it's really, really, really important.
If you're progressive, and upset, yes.
Yeah. Sorry. but a vote for Trump is the end of democracy in America. It is markedly worse. I don't like the idea of another Biden presidency, but if Donald Trump becomes president again, that's probably the end of democracy in America. And you have to look no further than what he and his surrogates are saying right now as they're campaigning. His language has completely changed. This is not, we would talk about this forever, going back to like 2015. Of like all the winks and nods and dog whistles and sort of like sideways comments that you're like, that smells a little Hitlery. And, people will go, oh, of course, you're just calling him Hitler because he's conservative, blah, 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 But these were dog whistles and signals at what they meant. And now he's not signaling or dog whistling anymore. He's just saying the thing out loud. He's practically quoting Hitler. And for example, Steve Bannon and Kash Patel were on one or the other's podcast doing whatever like this week. And Steve Bannon like jokes saying, "Oh, so what are you going to be the next CIA director, Kash Patel?" And Kash Patel basically goes on to say that not only are they going to, basically purge the government of anyone who's not MAGA. He says straight up, because what we learned this time is that having people in government leadership positions who are not on the team is not going to help our agenda. And as a result, we're only going to have MAGA people in all the positions. There will be no General Mattis or traditional Republicans, like party staples. There will be no Mitt Romneys,
no
or
rhinos.
Liz
There's no
Cheney's,
rhinos
or Paul Ryans. Yeah, you're not gonna have any of those people in the administration. It's gonna all be Stephen Miller and Kash Patel and Steve Bannon. That's what you're going to get. And they've basically said that not only are they going to use the Department of Justice and the intelligence infrastructure they're going to go after all of the people who perpetrated the fraudulent election of 2020 that denied Donald Trump his rightful second term, release all the January 6 people, and start going after both civilians, journalists, and political leaders who oppose the president. Like, they're saying it right out loud.
Yeah,
and the worst on the right, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and the even more extreme people that you haven't heard of in local districts for state legislatures, city councils, school boards, and like congressional races are out there saying they want to put queer kids in camps and the parents who gender affirm them. They're using Moms for Liberty is literally quoting Hitler in their newsletter. They have private stream. Moms for Liberty has on their private Telegram chats that are recently, coming out in the press that they're doing all this preserving of stuff for white children, basically using the 14 words as sort of their guiding principle. It's not quiet anymore.
Yeah, so to your point there, he was Sean Hannity 2 days ago at a town hall.
Exactly, that was a great one.
Right, here's on the screen here exactly. Press Sean Hannity not to promise to abuse power. Donald Trump said agree he wouldn't quote other than day one, adding we're going to close the border and we're drilling. After that, I'm not a dictator.
Except that's actually kind of a misleading headline, because if you watch the full clip, then he goes on to basically say on day one I'm closing the border. And what was the second thing he said? Oh, he goes, on day one, we're going to close the border and drill
right.
about oil. So he doesn't actually answer the question about, are you going to retaliate against people? Are you going to be, are you going to go after political opponents and whatnot? He doesn't actually answer the question beyond saying, except for day one. So no, it's very clear though when you watch the rallies, when you watch interviews like this, and again, listen to the surrogates, the people who will be cabinet secretaries and presidential appointees if Donald Trump were to win again. And yeah, they will if No, it's the end of democracy as we know it if Donald Trump gets another term.
But this is the thing. I think
it's not
right.
the same as 16 or 20.
No, this is the thing too. Also, too, I think so. Like in talking to a lot of folks about this, especially Americans. Okay, so for example, one of the big examples they use as a reason why Biden could be in trouble is because in Michigan, for example, Michigan is a massive swing state. That's 20 electoral votes right there. For example, 20 there's 20,000 Arab Americans live in that region.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Biden won that state by only 10,000 votes in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So if you to assume that even the majority of those folks don't vote for Biden this time around, that doesn't mean you can vote for Trump either. They can go third party or stay home.
Yeah, but as we've discussed in the two previous elections, abstaining is voting for Trump if you live.
That's my point.
If you live in a tight state,
and I've told folks that in the past, even on this podcast, and people who are still like, "Oh, Joe Biden must still win to figure it out." No, you have. I think you're being a little bit too naive to the situation here. This situation in Palestine, people are so frustrated. Not to mention you have other things, the economy and all stuff. They'll say the economy's better and certain numbers are better, but
I mean, by according to metrics, yes, the economy broadly is better, but the metrics
people don't feel that though.
Metrics, and because the metrics we use to make that statement don't reflect how 95% of America is doing. The stock market and job creation numbers and GDP growth don't reflect the day-to-day experience of people like you and me.
I knew I was in trouble by this when I don't want to put certain family members out there in my family who are close to me have said who voted for Biden in 2020, they will not vote for him in 2024 because of this conflict.
I've got I know a number of people who are saying the same thing. They're going to vote third party or they're going to abstain. And there's another element. You mentioned Michigan. That's actually really important to the thing I'm about to say. One of the other sides of that is you have groups that are specific, like political action groups and rallying groups, advocacy groups, whatever, that are Muslim centered. Mm-hmm. And they are going to places like Arizona and Michigan and other swing states that were super, super tight. And they're basically encouraging, not necessarily to vote for Trump, but to not vote for Biden. And what's really important is that this messaging by a lot of these groups is disingenuous because these were groups that were never left wing. They never supported Biden, and they probably were out for Trump in the first place. Like they're trying to the Republican political machine, as we know, can't win when poor people and people of color vote. That's like what elections have taught us since like 2004.
Yeah.
And so since about 2008 and 2012-ish, it's been a consistent mission of the GOP in this country to ensure that people who will never vote for them just don't vote. So old black women in Tennessee who don't have driver's licenses, now they do voter ID. Or now, they're going out and frankly preying upon a horrific tragedy, the killing of thousands of innocent people in Palestine, to go out there and disingenuously peddle this message that like don't vote for Biden, and it could seriously disrupt the election. And that's exactly what the GOP is hoping for, because as we saw in 2016, when moderates and independents stay home, the right wing wins.
So you want to go to Biden quick? The Biden's numbers then? So we switch on Biden?
Yeah.
All right. So Joe Biden's approval numbers are very concerning. Right
in
now,
the toilet.
Right now,
I haven't even looked yet, but I imagine.
No. You're gonna see. No, you're gonna see right now.
We have to bring it up on the screen.
No, you're gonna see right now.
I'm betting it's under 30%.
No, it's not that low. It's not Bush.
Well, it depends on the age group.
As of this morning, his approval rating's at just under 38%. His disapproval rating right here, you see right now from 538. His disapproval rating is at 55.7% right now. It's highest it's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
And we're less than
and that's being driven because I saw a poll like a week or two ago. Without digging into it further, I would venture to guess that that's probably being driven by the conflict. 18 to 34. Well, no, but also the 18 to 34 age grouping demographic is probably something like 80-20 disapprove to approve. And that was one of the most important voting blocks for the Democratic candidates up to and including Joe Biden in both 20 and the 2022 midterms. So if you lose the young people, you can't win the election.
No, exactly. I mean, this is really very serious stuff here, man. I mean,
yeah.
And people are gonna say, well, the polls. And look, I've heard good arguments about the polls and this and that, and they don't necessarily poll the same way because you can't get hold of people on cell phones, the landlines, and I get all that. But
yeah, a lot of the polling doesn't accurately. It's honestly, it's probably worse because the group that polling fails to capture the most is the 18 to 34 demographic, and the 18 to 34s that they are capturing are staunchly opposed. They're disapproving of Biden's leadership right now.
Right.
And because I mean, it comes back to what we've been talking about since the pandemic is that, for example, the very same corporations who have co-opted our entire political process have continued to lie and say that inflation and wages is forcing them to have to consistently raise prices across the board on all goods and services at a rate that it's just not true. It's just not true. These companies are posting record profits. They're making more money than they've ever made. CEO compensation and executive compensation that's tied to stock prices is at an all-time high, and wealth disparity in this country continues to get worse despite being the worst it's been since the Gilded Age.
Yeah.
So literally, wealth disparity in the United States is literally the worst it's ever been.
Even the polls that Biden's leading in, which is very few, for example, The Economist, +1 Biden, okay?
So that tells me it's really +4 Trump.
Right.
Because it didn't capture enough young people.
Number 3rd, last polling here, Morning Consult, even, okay? Big Village, Trump +6. Big Village again, +8 Trump.
Well, and what that's not showing you either is what third-party candidates might be siphoning off as well.
Right.
Because that's really important, as we saw in 2016 with like Gary Johnson and Jill Stein. You have a few of those kind of characters. We've seen them in the past. Ralph Nader, Ross Perot. You had these sort of like perennial disruptors over the last 30 years. And RFK Jr., Cornel West, some of these people, they could prove if they siphon off 1 or 2%, that's the ball game.
Now, the thing is, though, the logic though on RFK Jr. is that, assuming he's still a factor by this time next year, or at least middle next year, that he would take from the Trump vote.
I think he just kind of fucks up the vote both ways, because he claims to be, he started out running for the Democratic nomination and now he's running an independent campaign, but a lot of the stuff he said has been positions that are really more aligned with the right or even far right, with like some of the anti-vax crap,
right,
and COVID crap. So I honestly, I think he would probably capture casual observers of news on both sides.
Look at this shit. So you got more polling here.
Nothing he says really holds up to any kind of real intellectual scrutiny. So it's like anybody like us who actually read, or people who are followers of politics like sports, they probably can't be bought by him unless they're true believers in the stuff he's saying. So I think it's like I said, it's probably mostly casual observers that guy captures.
So look at this more troubling poll here. So again, Trump +5, Trump +2. Then you have polling with hypothetically Nikki Haley in the race, Haley +10. Okay, according to HarrisX.
Yeah, if your BP race is between Haley and Kamala Harris, that's gonna tip towards the Republicans because people don't like Kamala Harris.
Right. DeSantis.
Although I don't see any world where Nikki Haley is the running mate unless Trump has no choice and the RNC basically shoves her down his throat, because he hates her. And she's been so like, his whole thing is not employing people or aligning himself with people who criticize him, and she's been very critical of him for years.
Again, polling, look, we could be wrong about this. We could see Joe Biden win this anyway. and things are going to be whatever. But if I'm a Democrat, you're hearing people, even Democrat donors now, talk about being very like concerned now about this. Like, you're concerned now?
Well, okay, so some of this too, there is a point of acknowledgement that you have to make and like kind of understand the civics of all of this. One of the biggest drivers for Joe Biden's disapproval rating right now is obviously the Israel-Hamas conflict and how he's handled it to this point, and especially in the beginning, atrociously. But the tide has definitely shifted, I would think, at say the State Department and in the administration about what is acceptable and what they're advising people to do. But by the same token, it's like, okay, do we want to be the world's police or not? Because it's like when we're fighting wars with countries where we don't see a point, it's like, wait, why are we the world's police? But then now when it's Israel, it's like, why isn't Joe Biden doing anything to stop this? It's like, well, he is, but Israel is its own country and they have their own military and they can kind of do whatever the fuck they want, despite unless somebody invades them.
We fund their country too, so we should have a say in a lot of things that goes on there.
Yeah, but that's important to understand is like, those are like once that money goes out, that's it. But we have treaties, contracts, agreements. There are things that like we're gaining mutual benefit from that also you can't necessarily just cut off the flow of money. There's other things tied to it. I'm just saying, again, not making any excuses for Joe Biden because I'm furious and I don't want him to be the nominee. But I understand that there are a lot of layers to this, and it's not necessarily just as simple as cutting off Benjamin Netanyahu's allowance. But it is really troubling. And so my tinfoil hat theory, as we move into the GOP field, is that it's not outside the realm of possibilities that Joe Biden won't be the nominee and that, for example, Gavin Newsom could be.
I'm glad you said that because that's the next segue here too. Also, because Gavin Newsom and Ron DeSantis did have a debate last week. I didn't get to watch the entire thing, but I did watch a chunk of it. I did actually watch highlights of it. Obviously, if you're conservative and you love DeSantis, you say he won. If you're liberal and blue, you say he got Newsom won the debate. I will say though, the most honest commentary I've gotten on this debate is from the Young Turks, actually.
Okay.
Even Anna Kasparian has called, and she's not even a fan of Gavin Newsom, and she's a progressive. She's a leftist.
Mm-hmm.
She can't stand Gavin Newsom because way he's run California and some of the things that she says he's not doing or whatever. She's had some critique of Newsom's performance. I don't see much contextual and much honest analysis from people other than the young Turks, because like everybody's in their camps. Well, DeSantis won because I'm red, and vice versa. That being said, I looked at that debate, and look, whether or not you love or hate Gavin Newsom, he looks like a future president. Like, I get the same kind of, not in the same a high end thing, but there's those Obama vibes a little bit because he's younger looking and he's suave, it's like back here. It's a politician. We get it, and I would say that because we talk about politics, we talk about presidential elections, especially too, optics matter. Optics matter. Even though Joe Biden could do the best job in the world, but because he looks old and he's mumbling and this and that and all that stuff and stumbling around and all that, people see that as a problem.
Well, yeah, I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about the last time we were together. Was the the 1960 presidential debate and what a mark on history that was, introducing television into the political process, and how much the optics of being young and vigorous versus old and sickly, and what that can do to your to people's perception of you. So right out the gate, we've obviously talked about Newsom a lot. I've lived in California most of my life. I would say the criticism of Gavin Newsom, especially the criticism that you hear in a state like Florida, are completely unfounded. He has done some really dumb shit. He has made some easy mistakes, missed easy layups. For example, he gets criticized a lot for how he handled COVID. Ron DeSantis is kind of the flag bearer or the
God king
bearer
of COVID.
Of like calling the shutdowns a complete failure and quarantining a disaster and vaccines, all of it, right? And so, of course, yes, he did kind of shit the bed going to the French Laundry when everyone was on lockdown. That was not a cool move. That was
Bad
like
optics.
douchebag Marie Antoinette kind of move, obviously. But the simple fact is that California is running at a budget surplus. Yes, our homelessness crisis is really bad. Our murder rate is significantly lower than that of Florida's. Our crime rates are significantly lower than that of Florida's. Our inflation and consumer price index is significantly lower than Florida's. Property taxes are significantly lower than Florida's.
This is true.
So yeah, people talk about, oh, well, California kills you in taxes. It's like, no, they just hit you with different taxes. It's, property, sales tax is probably higher in some places because of like LA and San Francisco and stuff. I don't know that one off the top of my head. But it's just different. And, I think, for example, Gavin Newsom has failed the trans community, has let workers down in a number of regards.
He's failed labor, definitely. He's failed labor.
Yeah, he's certainly failed impacted families. From when we talk about 2020 and police violence and qualified immunity and all of that kind of stuff. But as a whole, like I, as a leftist, my scorecard is not, I would call it B+ at best. But the simple fact is that from an objective standard, and when you look at a whole electorate, Gavin Newsom is doing a pretty terrific job running the 5th largest economy in the world. Mm-hmm. And being the governor of California is not like being the governor of other states. And I think any argument that Ron DeSantis won that debate is frankly absurd, like just absurd, because throughout, it was really Sean Hannity and Ron DeSantis versus Gavin Newsom, because half the questions that were posed to Gavin Newsom were based on false equivalencies or false premises, and they didn't either the numbers they were citing were inaccurate. The way they were framing the question does not actually represent the question they're asking. Talking about like homelessness or what have you.
Right.
There was a lot of bad faith acting going on by both Ron DeSantis and Sean Hannity. And despite that, Gavin Newsom still bitch slapped DeSantis all over the stage. He hit him on his record. He hit him on numbers. He hit him on his career. And while DeSantis looked as the most charismatic and prepared he's looked on any debate stage, speech, televised interview, town hall, he looked more prepared than he'd ever been. But he still got his ass handed to him. Like, let's make no mistake. And Gavin Newsom does look and talk like a president. Again, he has gaps, he has mistakes. If he were to run a national campaign, he better hire I would imagine the DNC would throw a ton of money into him in a vacuum. Obviously, not running against Joe Biden, but if he were the nominee, I got to think that the communication staff that's going to be around him is going to probably keep his foot out of his mouth more often than not. And for example, if God forbid Joe Biden were to drop out of the race and Gavin Newsom were to slide in as the nominee, I have absolutely no problem voting for Gavin Newsom. And I think that once a national campaign debate was aired out, and we have a year of coverage of that, America would probably side with Newsom just on like age and overall competence.
Mark, I read you the poll numbers about 10 minutes ago on this show. Mm-hmm. If you're a top Democrat, whether or not you believe in polls and that, you have to believe in polls because you can't be in politics and not at least look at polls.
Well, and they do their own polling anyway. They know what it is. Just it's like obviously the internal White House polling, DNC polling,
right?
They have their own polls.
What I'm saying, but even those polls are saying the same thing. I'm reading here off the screen here. Okay,
probably worse.
If you're a top Democrat, the idea of Newsom jumping this race has to at least cross your mind at this point now. We're in December right now. The last president, I think, that actually decided to run for president in the middle of a campaign or middle of was LBJ in '68.
Yeah.
I think he dropped out that race 6 months prior to the election. So there's still time. There's actually
that would be May. That would put us
March
31st. May of 24.
March 31st. No, it's a little longer than that. March 31st.
Oh, okay, 8 months.
Well, March 31st, he said, "I will not seek re-election."
Okay.
So
Okay.
So there's precedent for
I
Biden
mean,
waiting a couple of months before
yeah,
deciding.
we could. I mean, I guess we could conceivably see that. I don't expect that because
They're stubborn. They're fucking stubborn.
well,
dude.
it's not even. I wouldn't even call it stubborn. It's arrogance. They sniff their own farts. You know what I mean? In the sense that because of how financially co-opted the government is on all sides and all facets, the leadership of the Democratic Party lives their life on the 45th floor, and they have no fucking clue what's happening on the ground. They say they do. They write their little talking points and stuff like that. But ultimately, they don't give a shit. They're rich people, and we're all plebs.
Even Trump's there. They're still rich anyway. They're still rich even with Trump's there. So
exactly.
No matter.
Exactly.
They don't care.
And they'll walk wealthy into a concentration camp when Trump tries to throw Nancy Pelosi in the resurrected Manzanar in 2026.
Here's my one takeaway though from this as we enter the final stage of this 24 campaign and the election, whatever. I do think no matter what happens, Biden gets reelected, Trump wins re-election 4 years after. 2028 is going to be a massive reset for both parties. I think opportunity here because
it has to be, or otherwise, like the American experiment is failing if we continue the way we're continuing. You know what I mean? It has to.
Part of me feels like the Democrats are saying, you know what? Let Biden try it. If it fails, we'll do a massive reset leading to 2028. Newsom be
That's what they're saying,
guy.
but there's not going to be a massive reset in 2028 because there won't be a Democratic Party if Trump gets elected in 2024. Like the Democratic Party will not see 2028.
I think the GOP in some ways have the same idea. The ones who publicly say like Trump, but they're not really for Trump, are hoping that this goes away another 4 years.
So you're talking about the handful of the handful of Republicans left that are not like card-carrying fascists and
right. I mean, the ones that's like, we have to stick to Trump because it is what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but, the Paul Ryan crowd.
Yeah, I think they're thinking, you know what? Either he goes to jail or he loses again, and he won't run again in 2028. If he loses this election again, he is not running in 2028.
I mean, when you just look at him, he's 78. He's a year and a half younger than Biden or something like that.
2 years.
2 years younger. Okay.
Yeah, two and a half, 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean,
they're both old.
He's fucking 78.
Well, between that
and when you talk about you see it in every presidential portrait, particularly of two-term presidents. The presidency takes years off your life. It ages the shit out of you.
Mm-hmm. Look at Obama for 8 years. You see, Obama looked like a young man.
Exactly.
And by 17, at the Trump inauguration, he looked like, get me the fuck out of here.
Grandpa Barry or something.
Yeah, for real. Like, for real. You keep that fucking job. I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
If I have that job, you ain't gonna like me. Shit.
So, or like in the West Wing, they always talk about like how terrible Josh Lyman looks. Like that's like a running thing throughout the show that the deputy chief of staff just always looks like shit.
Yeah.
But no, I would like to say in a vacuum, in a perfect world, in a normal America, 2028 needs to be a massive reset. But I think the DNC needs to pull their head out of their ass.
I agree.
They won't be around to reset in 2028 if Donald Trump wins this election.
Totally agree with you. That being said, us talking about this and the election in 11 months, we agree that Trump is the nominee, right?
Of course.
It's going to happen, right?
I mean, he's up by what? He's up by like 60 points on the entire field.
Some shit, like 45 plus.
It's a race for VP. One of the things I did notice, for instance, last night is that probably Nikki Haley didn't do a lot to help herself because the whole thing turned into Chris Christie slapping Vivek Ramaswamy around the stage.
He enjoys that. I'll tell you that.
I enjoy it because Vivek is a pain in the ass who just outright lies.
But I will say, even though I'm not a fan of the guy, he does touch on some things that like it makes you think like he's not as smart as you think he is, but he does touch on some things that culturally young folks like.
Well, no, he does. It's the same cheap carnival barker trick that all of these idiot Republicans who are trying to do a Trump impression do. They say this like very surface level, generally true statement that kind of appeals to everyone's emotions.
Right.
And then, so it's like, oh, well, sometimes he says something. And you're like, no, the fuck he doesn't. He says the sky is blue, and then he goes on to like rail on gender affirming healthcare. That's not what he's doing. Like, it's misdirection. It's a technique to get you to swallow. It's a spoonful of sugar to make the lies go down.
He
Like,
uses the Obama playbook on that side of the aisle, definitely.
yeah, in order to just bald-face lie and profess nonsense.
Yeah. I am fascinated though for Trump. We assume he's a nominee. Like the idea of a DeSantis VP is out the window now, right? You think?
No way.
Yeah.
There's no way DeSantis is going to be his running mate.
Do you think Trump really doesn't like him anymore? You think that thing's really a real thing? I'm not convinced 100% anyway.
Donald Trump always tells you exactly what he's thinking.
But Trump's,
Like,
but Donald Trump
he lies about factual things.
But Donald Trump
telling
also,
you his opinion of something.
But Donald Trump
absolutely telling you what he thinks.
But Donald Trump's also chaotic. Like Tucker Carlson said on
no,
record,
because
I hate him.
You have to understand. His whole thing now is loyalty. That's the only thing he gives a fuck about. That's what's shifted since, say, 2015. 2015, 2016, yes, he would have, like, let Ted Cruz into the administration if it made sense. Things like that. He's not doing that anymore.
So I'm
100% either you're with me or you're not, and if you've ever said boo about me, fuck you.
I'm going to throw out a couple names here, and you give me percentage chances that they would be the VP nominee. Okay, running mate rather. Okay, Ron DeSantis.
0.
Okay, ooh, there you go.
No, like under 20%.
Okay, Nikki Haley.
45 to 55%.
That's a higher people getting credit for because
I'd call that one more of a coin flip because again, woman, she can play on the whole non-white thing, even though she's very much white.
She caters to the rhinos.
She can claim non-white because she is Indian, but she looks white and she's white passing and she doesn't scare most of the GOP voters. So yeah, I would call that a coin flip. He wouldn't like it. It would definitely be vinegar in his mouth to do it, but it might be one of those things that in order to win, he has to do.
And she also appeals to the moderate Republicans who don't like him, but like, I like the policies, but I don't like the guy, that kind of thing. So she does that. She does.
Yeah.
Tim Scott.
Under 15%.
Okay. Definitely considering that one too also. Chris Christie, 0%. No.
Yeah, that's 0. That's a 0.
Kerry Lake.
That one I could see.
I can see
that one. I actually could see that.
I can see that, but that would be very bad strategically because of the fact that you can't.
Oh yeah, Terry. She's an awful candidate, but she's good at retail politics, and she's a woman, and she helps in Arizona.
Yeah,
which is an important swing state. Like that. Like, but she's also. I mean, she's a true believer.
You think so?
She's a MAGA true believer.
Yeah, she's nuts.
She's insane.
Go
back and watch some. Go watch some of her debate performances from whatever election it was that she lost in Arizona.
Senate.
Senate.
Was it governor or Senate? It was governor.
Governor.
Right.
It was scary.
Finally, Vivek Ramaswamy. See, that's the one I think is
that actually wouldn't surprise me because again, he does a Trump impression and he's full of shit. Like he's a windsock. He's gonna go wherever the tide takes him. So no, that one I could see. I could see that one. I would call that, say, maybe 40%. I think somebody like higher. Nikki Haley, Marjorie Taylor Greene, or Kerry Lake is probably likely only because we're getting to a point where if the name at the top of the ticket is not a woman, the second name on the ticket needs to be. That's kind of just like where political strategy is going. So even though it's not what Trump would want, I think he could stomach either Haley, Green, or Lake.
I will say though, Vivek though is a tempered down version of what Martin Green and those folks are.
Doing what DeSantis did when he became governor of Florida.
Like,
he's waving the Trump flag. He's doing a Trump impression. He's doing it badly, but he does have some kind of charisma. He's not, he's not 80 years old.
And he's cleaner. So, he's cleaner with it than anybody else is too.
Yeah, he's a little. Yeah, okay.
Like smarmy,
yeah, he's got a
bad
little better. He's got a little better form swinging his flaming sword than some of the others.
One last political thing. I mean, we can touch it real quick. George Santos, he'd be the next big reality star, right?
You mean my congressman, former congressman?
Yeah. Your thoughts on all that?
Although one thing that absolutely cracked me the fuck up was, so now George Santos, in addition to, George, I have so many thoughts on George Santos. He's obviously been playing a character for a while as far as George Santos, the politician. You know, God only knows what's true and what isn't. But he seems kind of sassy and spiteful now.
Oh, yeah.
And he managed, I mean, obviously, despite being kind of a joke to most of his colleagues, a complete joke to most of his colleagues, he did hear some things, it seems, and he did learn some things, it seems, and he is just throwing darts at everyone he possibly can. And one of the funnier occurrences, he's now on Cameo.
Yeah.
And John Fetterman hired him to troll Senator Bob Menendez, and chef's kiss. That was amazing.
I'm bringing it up right now. Keep talking. I'm bringing it right now because I just saw the CNN video of that.
Yeah, but I mean, for example, what does it mean for me here in Long Island that some other Trump flag waver is going to win it? Like,
you think so?
Yeah.
Is that a very heavy red district that he's in?
Blood red.
Oh, that's why he won that.
Yeah, Nassau and Suffolk County is blood red. Like when you talk about all these little villages out here,
right.
When you get past, once you get outside of Queens and you start really, or even past, like, say, Hempstead, Garden City area, and you start really getting out into the suburbs and the land of former mob estates and things like that, it's a lot of police, a lot of fire, a lot of military, a lot of working people, and people who've loved Trump since the 80s.
Yeah. It's
a lot of older people. Yep, a lot of older traditionally conservative people, a lot of Catholic,
Yeah, I'm bringing it up right now.
I would say your big three groups here are probably Polish, Irish, and obviously not in that order, but Italian, Irish, and Polish. Those are kind of like the big three that you see the most out here. Kowalski and Gambelli.
Yeah.
And and Orion. But no, yeah, three groups that support the police, vote red, go to church. So
yeah, New York is a very heavy blue state, royal blue state. There are a lot of heavy red.
Only in the 5 boroughs. That's kind of what I'm learning, is that it's New York City that's liberal and the rest of the state isn't.
Right.
With pockets, obviously, in other cities and other places and stuff.
It's like California too. California is a very blue state too, but has a lot of red pockets.
Yeah,
as well.
LA and San Francisco are blue, and the rest of the state is red. With exceptions.
Here's George Santos on Cameo singing apparently singing Taylor Swift. Hold on.
Oh man.
Song is definitely going to be Trouble. I knew you were trouble when you walked in.
Oh my God.
That's me. Bye.
Get the fuck out of here. Are you serious?
That man was a United States congressman.
Yeah. You voted, not you, but New York's district.
Yeah, not me. I didn't live here. And I wouldn't have anyway.
You get what you vote for, right? No, he will be, dude, that guy, and I can't stand him, obviously. That has nothing to do with politics. He's a smart piece of shit. He will be he is going to milk this shit as much as he can. He'll be the new Joe the Plumber, but actually elected. he'll be on Dance with the Stars. I guarantee he'll be on every reality show. You watch. I'm telling you right now. I'm telling you. He's going to milk this shit.
Yeah, he's gonna make the full run of it. He's gonna do everything he possibly can to stay relevant and get paid and capitalize on this stuff now. And I hope he does, because he's gonna have some very expensive lawyer bills and big fines coming when they uncover all the shit he embezzled.
Yes, sir. All right, two more things to get you out of here. Lakers, they're in the semifinals of the in-season tournament. First of all, are you watching the Lakers?
I haven't been watching closely because, truthfully, I end up falling asleep most of the time.
Don't feel bad.
This is a struggle you obviously understand.
Right.
But
I'm
learning, the fact that my sports night ended in California, it's over by 10:15 unless a baseball game goes into extreme extra innings or something like that. Now Laker games don't start till 10:30 for me.
Yeah.
So I don't make it past halftime very often.
Yeah, I do. I told you.
I have a bad habit, especially in our short attention span age, that I always watch the second half of the game. So.
Yeah. I have the same problem.
No, I haven't watched a ton. I did see the highlights from the Phoenix game, quarterfinal game the other night, and the controversial call about the timeout with Austin Reeves and stuff like that. But no, I think the Lakers it's hard to tell what they are. They look good. They look great when they're good, and they look bad when they're not. And LeBron is a freak of nature. I'm going to be 40 in less than 6 months. And when he came into the league, I was a 19-year-old college freshman.
It's crazy, right?
Like, insane. And he looks exactly the same. I mean, like, bigger, stronger, but like everything about his game more or less looks the same or better than when he came into the league, because he didn't have a jump shot when he came into the league. But it's hard to have a real identity for them, because it's just been like the rotations have just been so weird as far as injuries and whatnot, and you haven't really had an extended period of time where the core of the team can play together, so it's hard to tell what they really are. But when things are clicking, they look really good.
Absolutely,
they look really, really good. They still don't have an answer for Jokic in the playoffs.
Nope, no one does.
Nobody does. I mean, why Dwight Howard doesn't have a job in the NBA to sit on the bench all season, play 8 minutes a game, and then just kick Jokic in the chest for 4 nights.
I think you know why. This recent news came out. Come on,
I know, but
it's not right.
You guys, like, if somebody doesn't in any of the good teams, Boston, it's gonna be a repeat of if you don't have somebody that can just kick Jokic in the chest. It's kind of it. I don't want to say that Jokic is like the second coming of Shaq, because that's absolutely not true.
There's different players too.
To an extent, it's kind of the same thing, where when you listen to people talk about what it was like to game plan against the Lakers during the Froby and Shaq years, was like you just needed 3 or 4 7-footers to go out there and eat fouls and get run over.
Yeah.
That's if you don't have an answer for Jokic, you don't have an answer to win a championship right now. Unless they get hurt or they shit the bed and their whole team comes to hate each other between now and April or something.
Which I don't see happening. That team is so unified. That's so good.
They're a really well-oiled machine.
Yeah. Last one. Shohei Ohtani. No word yet where he's going. I mean, the word is that the finalists are pretty much the Dodgers. Angels obviously always in it because they had his right, of course. The Giants, we've heard, is a team that's in the mix. I've said Seattle is definitely a wild card.
Well, it feels to me like if you're a top flight Japanese player, when you talk about guys like Hideo Nomo, Hideki Matsui, the guy that had the weird screwball pitch in, I can't think of his name now, in Boston. For the most part, with the exception of it's outside of the West Coast, it's the Yankees and maybe Boston if they throw a bunch of money at it. But Japanese players tend to like West Coast cities. I think it probably has to do with, if nothing else, flight time to get home.
Yep.
But I've felt like for a year this has been sort of the Dodgers to lose, and the Giants are, to me, probably the second team in the race, because they have Andrew Freeman's former partner in LA running their organization. And as much as it tastes like vinegar in my mouth to say, the Giants are rebuilding, and they have some really, really, really smart contractors on the job in their front office. And so They worry me in any negotiation that they can bring together a package. They have 3 World Series in the last 13 years. Like that, they've done things right for a long time. And so I could see them doing. I don't see any world where the Angels bring Ohtani back because they're just a fucking disaster of an organization. Like I've literally had friends that work there, and it's a shit show. They're one of the worst run teams in baseball.
Oh, no doubt. By the way, is it the Red Sox? Is it Koji Uehara?
No, it was a guy who was a star in the World Baseball Classic.
Is it Yoshida? Yoshida? Masataka Yoshida?
Something like that.
Matsuzaka? Daisuke Matsuzaka?
Daisuke Matsuzaka.
Okay.
Daisuke Matsuzaka. That's what it was. God, that was driving me crazy. Yu Darvish has been kind of an interesting exception because he's bounced around so much. But yeah, I mean, it seems like Japanese players tend to like the West Coast, and so it always made sense to me that San Francisco, LA, and Seattle would be kind of front runners in that race. The Cubs were in there for a minute, but they got dismissed fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And then when you see the Yankees trading for Juan Soto, which is really interesting, that tells me they're probably not making a big run at Ohtani, or it's been made clear to them that they're not in the race.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think to me it's between the Dodgers and Giants, and then the most likely dark horse would be Seattle. That's the order I would put it in. But, you know, Dave Roberts kind of tipped his hand a little bit, and unless he's getting out in front of his skis.
Which, by the way, people make a big deal about that. Who cares?
I mean, and it was honestly, I ended up going on like the Dodgers radio Instagram and like seeing what he actually said. It wasn't that big a deal. It was more the aggregators and people who take ESPN and local news headlines and then turn them into a meme that looks like a news story. You know,
it's not really a news story yet.
All the guys that are like imitating clutch points and stuff like that. They make it into this thing that like Ohtani is all but signed with the Dodgers, and you're like, but that's not what anyone said. But no, I felt like the Dodgers have been the front runner in this conversation for a while. I mean, Ohtani kind of let some things out during the season that suggested he wanted to stay in Southern California, and you can't imagine he's going to want to play in either San Diego or Anaheim. So who does that leave?
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, Mark, it was great as always. The best part is that 2024 is coming up soon. It's election cycle. So, you know, you and I can wrap up our election coverage on the podcast definitely next year, especially. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
You're not on X anymore, right? On Twitter anymore? You done that?
No. I've been done with
you've
that.
been gone. I think before Elon took over, I think you were done with
that.
No,
it was as soon as they handed him the keys, I deleted my account.
Did you see the one last thing we get out here? Did you see the thing he did? What was it? A town hall he did overseas?
I saw something about that, but honestly, I try to purge him from my timeline as much as humanly possible. So what happened?
No, basically advertisers go fuck themselves. Like he's asking, what if advertisers bribed you, you know, for stuff to be on the platform? He goes, go fuck yourselves. Bribe me.
I'm just so ready for him to go away or to build a submarine to the Titanic or something.
Oh God.
Go build
He's easy content though. He's content.
Go build a carbon fiber 2-piece submarine. Okay.
I'll take care of 9 kids.
Take it to the Mariana Trench or something.
I'll go take care of 10 kids. You know, that kind of thing. You know, you have 10 kids.
He's just such a piece of shit. He's such an evil piece of shit.
He's inconsistent. My problem is inconsistent. Like he says one thing, does another.
He's gross and grimy, and I feel like what we know about him that is terrible is like the tip of the iceberg, and you know,
either like words, you think?
Yeah, sooner than later. The truth is going to come out about him, and it's going to be really ugly. Speaking of truth coming out that's really, really, really ugly, we got to touch on is the New York adult survivors lawsuits. Holy shit.
Oh my God! With Diddy,
how did we forget Diddy? We got this little. Let's put this little.
All right, let's do it. Let's 5 minutes on this one. A lot of shit coming out.
Sean Combs.
For the record,
holy shit!
You know my position on things like especially with celebrities, like, you know, evidence to see who's out there first. But there's been a lot of shit said about this guy for years.
If you got the power to bury lawsuits the way that man obviously does, you don't settle within 6 hours of the filing. Like,
Yeah.
Cassie's attorneys filed that document in the New York State Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
It was like 4 p.m. on Tuesday, and they had a settlement by like 7 a.m. on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Like, if you're a dude who has the ability to tie people up in legal red tape until they go blind with paperwork, to quote, A Few Good Men, like, he's one of those dudes.
Yeah.
He can bury shit. And if he doesn't, that tells you a lot. But no, did you see the one that came out yesterday?
I'm trying to think of I know Jamie Foxx had one come out recently.
Alleging that he participated in the gang rape of a 17-year-old.
Jamie Foxx?
No, Diddy. That was the latest update about Diddy. Like,
oh no! I missed
and
that
then,
one.
Yeah, there's all these other people who have been mentioned, and I mean, it's hundreds of people because of the expiration date of this like adult survivors law in New York. But there were obviously a number of celebrities in there, so that carried the news. People like Jamie Foxx and whatnot. But no, as of yesterday, Diddy was accused of participating in the gang rape of a 17-year-old.
Oh shit!
In a new lawsuit that was just filed.
Wow.
So I don't know. Listen to 50 Cent. Go listen to 50 Cent talk about Diddy.
Yeah,
and I mean, there's other people that do too. The footage is old. It's been out there for a while. He just, to me, like, obviously innocent until proven guilty. But I believe women, number one. And
I believe most women.
I just mean as a whole. I start from that position and work backwards. You know what I mean? If that's where it starts. If a woman accuses you of sexual assault, you pretty much are guilty until proven innocent to me.
Right.
But it is clear to me personally. Like, I've never liked Sean Combs. I was a Tupac fan and stuff, and when I was in 7th grade, But
I was a Biggie guy, and I never liked Diddy.
Yeah, I always thought that what Suge Knight said at the Source Awards was a pretty accurate appraisal of CEO Diddy of Bad Boy, or Diddy CEO of Bad Boy in the 90s. He basically robbed Mace of his entire catalog. Mm-hmm. He has continued to profit off of Biggie for longer than he's been alive. And people like to forget that, Biggie was leaving Bad Boy right before he died.
There were folks actually that still think that he was behind the Biggie.
That's what I mean is, like, there's so much smoke. There's so much smoke about so many things. Regardless of what is proven, my gut and my intuition tell me that Sean Combs is a bad man who has done a lot of bad shit for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And what the specifics? Did he kill Tupac? Did he kill Biggie? Did he rape women? I don't know. He did something, and he's always given me stranger danger. You know what I mean?
That's a good way to put it.
It's the same thing of, like, when you're at a park and there's an adult that doesn't feel right. Like, I get that same pit in my stomach about Diddy. Like, I wouldn't want to hang out with him.
Yeah, I always felt he always felt kind of shady. I didn't know for what. This felt kind of shady. I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know what you did, but you did something, or you did a lot of something.
Yeah. I'm glad to touch on that one because I've kind of missed that last lawsuit. Oh my God, I mean, he's lucky he's not as relevant as he was years ago.
Yeah, I'm curious to see, obviously, what these New York this Adult Survivors Act, the slew of lawsuits. And what comes out of it. I think that could be kind of another punctuation in the Me Too movement. I think a lot more is bound to come out. So wrapped up with Israel-Hamas election, it's a lot of the accused are probably flying under the radar right now. Like, it would probably a year and a half ago, it would probably be a huge story that Jamie Foxx's name is in there. And other celebrities who, like, I can't even think of who's in there. I know there were like half a dozen when the stuff first broke, like a week or two ago.
I just look it up real quick before we get out of here. What is it? So it's New York. What's the New York Survivors Act?
New York, yeah. It's their lawsuits filed. So the New York Adult Survivors Act passed in, I don't know, and it has certain like basically extensions of statutes of limitations and expands previous limitations for survivors of sexual assault. And again, this all happened before I was a New Yorker, so I'm not terribly familiar with all the specifics. But there was an important deadline that just passed or is about to pass in being able to file a number of these lawsuits. So that's why you have all of these names coming out. I mean, there were like hundreds of people named. I mean, Eric Adams was
I saw that part. I saw that.
That was a big one. That was and others. So it was like half a dozen celebrities that got mentioned. But Eric Adams and Jamie Foxx were the two big ones.
So since this act was passed, more than 3,000 civil suits have been filed.
3,000. Okay.
Hospital and jails. Looking to see anything else that's written last week. Andrew Cuomo, Eric Adams, has been listed in that. For example,
Sean Combs, of
Sean
course.
Combs, obviously. Jamie Foxx, we said a little while ago. Just the other names that pump up here. Looking here, 2022. So basically, the suit it got basically re-signed, we would call it. How the word you use, like it opened last year.
Yeah,
extended,
there was
right.
it was supposed to end. It got extended, and so all these 3,000 lawsuits get filed. And I mean, most of these are workplace,
Right.
teacher student kind of things, community colleges. Like it's a lot of that. But like again, Governor Cuomo, Mayor Adams, Buffy, Jamie Foxx. Like there's some big names that are mentioned in here as well. And what that does, and like you see it in the hip hop podcast, especially as you're hearing more and more of old heads of rap kind of talk about this stuff on different shows, whether it's Drink Champs or, Breakfast Club or whatever, or, any number, that whole orbit.
Yeah.
And you hear a lot of these older guys, 50 being kind of one of the loudest, like they are pointing the finger, and it's like every time they get asked about it, like, so-and-so has been sued. I'm not going to name, somebody in particular because I don't want to,
right, of course,
saying something inaccurate. But like, so-and-so has been named, and then 50 gets asked about it, and he's like, yeah, man, that motherfucker's been weird. Like,
yeah.
They say,
and they got beef too, apparently. They got beef, apparently, too. They got beef for
Oh, yeah, but I just mean it'll come out where somebody will get asked, or somebody who has, some old producer will get asked, and it's like, oh, yeah. That dude's been a fucking creep since the 90s. And you're like, wait a minute. Why didn't nobody say anything?
Because it's Hollywood. Hollywood weird, man.
We know why,
weird.
But yeah, it's like if you're out there listening to a lot of these podcasts and, radio shows or whatever, it's like the writing's kind of on the wall for a lot of these.
You think?
Mm-hmm.
So, Mark, good job, man.
Thank you. Always a pleasure. Love being here.